Hold on. There we go. Hey guys. Yeah, that was a play along track from my book that obviously I haven't played in a while, but um, it's from the Lucky Seven chapter of the book, and there's a fun little play along that I wrote with Johnny Young in here. That's the main theme is in nine, and sort of that when it goes to the A section, it's in seven. And since the topic tonight is odd time signatures, and playing, feeling, counting, subdividing odd time signatures, so I figured it would be appropriate. And in that tune, there I made the subdivisions very clear. And the opening of the song is playing this nine thing, and I'll show you. It's a linear pattern. I'm just going to play it, and once I've played through that, I'm going to start to break down basically from the beginning how time signatures are put together, what the numbers mean, and the easiest way and the best way to recognize them and to begin to subdivide and count them. So this little linear pattern is this. It's pretty simple, even though I was messing it up. So we have 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So the 3 is on the kick drum. So we have all this 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And then that gets answered with a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, which is all 9/8, right? So we're playing 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Notice I'm not counting to 9. It would just be so annoying to try to count to 9. So I'm counting in groups of 3, subdividing in groups of 2 and 3, which goes back to the beginning of odd times. Even in the 14th century, there was music being written in odd time signatures, and then everything was being subdivided in what was considered duple and ternary groupings, which is what I'm kind of doing here, or thought of as in folkloric dancing, where there's odd times. They're thinking of short and long steps, and we'll get into some of that as we go. But so once again, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's the first theme at the top of the tune. And then it goes into a second theme, which is basically playing this. So we're playing this. Let me think about that again. So, oh, there it is. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3 is the next part. And that part I'm basically playing 1 and 2 and then a Swiss Army triplet. And so that part is in the transcription. All these parts are in the transcription. However, later on I played something different. I did more of a 1 and 2, 1, 2, 3. So 1 and 2, and still has that 1 and 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3 feel in it. And I'm just playing it a little wider and a little more open. So those are the first two themes. Right? And then we have a bar of 5 that brings us into the main 7/8 section, which I call the A section of the tune. Kind of, I feel like these are intro themes that go to this sort of A section. And so 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5N is the little fill to go in. And then we went into a regular 7/8 type funky fusion groove, right? So now that groove, what I did was I split it so that the backbeat doesn't always land in the same place. So I'm playing this. So notice every other bar I put the snare on 1. So it's sort of 1, 1, 2, 4. Right, so I'm reversing that each time. Now, let's talk about, so I called it a regular 7 kind of groove. So we're going to talk about how do we get to that point. And if you're unfamiliar with playing with sort of these regular odd time signatures, I'm going to break down basically how we count everything. So, you know, and here's the thing. It's understanding what a time signature is, understanding what the numbers mean. So there's a PDF file that you could download and check out along with me during this episode 6 live stream, Intro to Odd Time Signatures. So basically the first 4 measures at the top of this thing explain how the numbers work in a time signature. And so for those of you that know this already, bear with me. I'm going to just break this down before we start jumping into how to form these other grooves. So the first thing is, what do the numbers mean? Top number, and you know, every student, I don't care if you're a kid or an adult, every time I ask this question, there's always a hesitation. They either forget it or don't know it. But most of the time, people kind of forget this, it seems. So top number, they always know how many beats in the measure, right? So whatever that number is, how many? It could be a 4, a 3, a 2, whatever, 7, 19, 15, whatever. And then the bottom number tells us what kind of notes we're going to be counting. So what I always say is say the time signature out loud in this way. 4/4 time, or 4/4 time, is 4 quarter notes per measure. So if you think of it like that, 4 quarter notes, that's the basic barometer for 4/4 time. 4 quarter notes. So if we play 1, 2, 3, 4, that's our quarter note pulse, and then everything that gets built around that will follow suit. So if it's 1, 2, 3 for quarter notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and for our 8th notes. So 4/4 time, which is like the basis of most American music, we're just counting 4 quarter notes. Okay. Now, what if the bottom number is GoPro video mode? There we go. So what if we change that bottom number and we make that bottom number an 8? And let's say, so we'll use 7, 8 as we did before. So we have 7 on top and we have 8 on the bottom. 7/8 notes. Just say it like that, 7/8 notes. So we're counting 8th notes as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. By the way, of course, every musician knows this, but don't say 7 with 2 syllables. I'm going to play a groove in 7/8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, no. So, of course, my teacher when I was a kid said, you have to say sev. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Now, of course, so that's 7/8 notes per measure. I just heard GoPro video mode. Why are you doing this to me, GoPro? So 7/8 notes per measure. Now, we're talking about odd time signatures. Not as in odd numbers, even though most of them will be odd numbers, but more about peculiar rhythms, or, let's say different, than just 4/4 all the time, or 3/4 is quite common. 7/8 is more commonplace now, even more than in earlier decades, but it's become more acceptable in American music. But this stuff all these odd numbers come from other countries' folkloric music, and we'll get to that. Let's just keep on the program at the top of the sheet. So if we just put a 15 on top and a 16 on the bottom, we're talking 15 16th notes. We're counting 15 16th notes. Each one gets one count, and there's 15 of them. I would never count 15 16 that way, but it would be, I'll do it on the hi-hat, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I played an extra one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Who the heck is going to count it that way? Nobody. So if you're talking about 15 16th notes, now we can start to subdivide, and we'll get into how that process works. But bear with me. One other one, 932. It just means 9 30-second notes in a measure. So this is just barometers, ways of counting the measures and the notes in the measures. It's not telling you what you have to play within that measure, but it's giving us a way to group and to count. Okay, so let's just talk about, back to 4/4 time, how we just start to stretch from 4/4, let's say, into 5/4 time, which is a beautiful time signature. By the way, my fascination with odd time signatures came at a pretty young age with my dad giving me Time Out by Dave Brubeck, that album. And there's Take 5 on it, which is a 5/4 jazz waltz. And then there's a tune called Blue Rondo a la Turk that the main theme is in 9. And definitely that influenced me for sure. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go. But so here's that rock groove in 4, and then we're just going to add a beat, and we'll be in 5/4 time, right? And I'll just make it super obvious before we try to make it groove and feel nicer, but we're just going to make it really obvious. So I'll do four bars of 4/4 time, and then I'll kick into a bar of 5, and I'll stay in 5 after that. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 1 and 2 3 and 4 and 5 and 1 and 2 and 3 4 and 5 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 1. Okay, so we added one extra beat. So now, of course, I don't subscribe to the idea of like, hey, let's learn an odd time signature and then force music around that. But when appropriate, or when a phrase adds beats to a measure or takes away beats from a measure in an organic way because the melody went that way or because the vocal line went that way, I think that's really the way this should all happen. So now I'm going to scroll this sheet into, we're going to go to rock beat in 4 and then a rock beat in 6/4 time. Really simple. We're adding 2 beats, right? Now, the 5/4 one, before I go ahead, you know, if you just add one bass drum or one snare drum, you're obviously playing an extra beat, so that gives you the 5/4, but there are ways to make these feel better. So just back to that one for 1 second. I'm just going to play on beat 5 beat add, just to make it a little smoother. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1. So if we start to mess with it and get a little more syncopated and try to make it rounder as it comes around the corner, I think of it as like hard corners. If you're playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, it's like very rough corners. I feel like it needs to be smoothed over. Come around the corner nicely. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah, 1, 2. Just kind of rounds it over. All right, so now 6/4. We're going to add 2 beats. This shows up in a lot of tunes where it's just an extra bar of 2. So if you think about compounding bars, we have a bar of 4/4, and we're adding 2 beats. It's compound measures, or you could think of it as one longer measure. One of the tunes in my book, Puffs of Smoke, that I do with Roger Street Friedman, there's a bunch of 6/4 bars in that tune where he just sang a line that was just another 2 beats. Very common in rock. And so 6 was just going to sound pretty normal. If there was no reference point, you wouldn't know I was in 6 just by the drums. So if I played, right? So again, odd, it's not an odd number. It's peculiar, different, right? So 6 beats. I actually had a track that I recorded, one of my first recording sessions. I was a teenager, and I played with this guy Harrison, and we were playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, there it is. So the groove I came up with it was an extra 2 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. So it had this little 3, 4, 5, a 60 and a 1, 2. So rounding the edges, right? So now we had 3 beats. Now we're in 7 4 times. So the bars are getting longer. Now going into 7, for me it's another compound bar. We'll play a bar of 4, play a bar of 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1. So again, find ways once you get the structure to make it feel good. And again, if you're writing music with people, the melody will tell you, the feeling of the groove will tell you what is appropriate to put in there and what isn't. Now, so we go from that 7. Now, what if we cut? Oh, let's do this. Can you raise that up a little, Billy? So rock beat in 7. So the subdivision, I already did that in there. Now, what if we were to go the other way? We're going to start taking notes away. So we already talked about 7/8 a little bit, but I'm just going to explain the process. So what if we chop off the last 8th note of a groove in 4/4? So we're playing 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2. So the and of 4 got chopped off. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1. So now if we cut that off, we get 1/8 note gone. We're in 7/8 notes now instead of 8/8 notes. You could think of 4/4 as 8/8 time, 8/8 notes, right? And now we're cutting it down. So 7/8 time is super common. Check out my buddy Joe Bergamini's Neil Peart book and transcriptions, and you could check out all the Rush stuff where they're using 7/8 time and other time signatures as well, but really common in progressive rock. And I will get to kind of a little bit of the history in a minute because it didn't originate with progressive rock, right? A lot of people maybe know their odd times from listening to progressive rock albums. I certainly did when I was a kid. I was listening to Genesis and Yes and Rush, UK. If you don't know UK, look them up. They have some really interesting stuff. I was listening to Bill Bruford with his original stuff, Jeff Berlin's original stuff, Alan Holdsworth, all these names that I'm throwing out were using odd times on a regular basis in their music. And also, I know, Mahavishnu Orchestra, which I came to respect and love really early on. And another thing I'll mention is Stravinsky, The Rite of Spring, which my father turned me on to, which has some really brilliant odd time signature sections in it. It's like rock and roll orchestra music in odd time signatures. Definitely check it out. And Bartók, and there's a ton of composers that were writing, 20th century composers that were writing really interesting odd time stuff in orchestral music. So, all right. So the next thing we have, let me look at my little sheet here. So we're doing 7/8 time. So we're chopping off an 8th note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, 7, 1. And you know, there's definitely, we're gonna have part 2 and 3 to this. There's ways of rounding this over that are different. Like for instance, what if and this is something that Gavin Harrison goes to lengths in his stuff about, but what if we played, I'll subdivide the symbol, so you'll have this perceived turnover with the symbol where the ride symbol is moving over the pattern. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Right, where you see because the symbol part is being played in groups of 2, it's turning over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's a lot of different tactics to make this stuff feel different and to make longer phrases. As I mentioned before, where I was putting the backbeat on 1 with the snare to turn that 7/8 phrase into a longer, technically a 7/4 phrase. If you add 2 bars of 7/8 together, we get 7/4. So let's keep moving. So we're going to scroll this to the next exercise. And so now we're talking about what if we take, so rock beat in 4/4 time or 16/16 time, and we're going to talk about what happens if we drop off the last 16th note. Now, and this is, we're getting into a little bit more advanced area of this. I did want to stop and kind of talk a little some other history, but let's just do this real quick. So what if we had, you know, before, as I said, 15/16, if I was playing, you know, trying to count 15/16 notes, it's kind of ridiculous. But let's take out the least common denominator. If we look at how 16th notes are grouped, if we have 15 of them, let's take out an even number of them. Let's take out 12 of them. So 12 16th notes would be 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a. And then to make it 15, we have 3 left. And we're just going to say 1, 2, 3. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 1, 2, 3. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 1, 2, 3. 1 E and a 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 1, 2, 3, 1. And the reason I said 4/4 is 16/16 time is because there's 16 16th notes in a bar of 4/4 time, right? So you could, in 4/4 time, you could conceivably just play 16ths, right? 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. So we're basically leaving off the last 16th note of a bar of 4/4. So what I like to think of with a time signature like 15/16 is one measure of 3/4 time, one measure of 3/16 time, and it would sound like this: 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. So that way I have that 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 1, 2, 3, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 1, 2, 3, 1. And, you know, 15 doesn't sound so scary when you think of it in terms of taking out a bar that you are familiar with. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3. Right? So there's a lot of ways to feel that and try different tempos with that. And if you're just playing eighth notes, you would play 1 and 2 and 3 and 1, 2, 3, 1. Right? So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? So 15/16 becomes a lot easier to digest if you're thinking of it as 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And that 1, 2, 3, those 3/16 notes, it's as if you're going to go 4 E end and there's no 4 E end, 1, 2, 3, 4 E end, 1, 2, 3, 4 E end, 1, 2. You could count it that way. I prefer the 1, 2, 3 just because it's easier to say. Excuse me. So right. So we're using 15/16 as an example where the bar got a little smaller. Now, what if we were to let's scroll that up a little, and I showed basically the 15/16. Oh, I gave some examples. So here would be just a couple different ways to do that 15-16 groove. I think I played these already, but it's in the sheet. I'll just explain. So line 21, 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. 1, 2, 3. I'm going 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1. Right? Then I could do it as a what I like to call a slap back, so a double backbeat. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Okay. Now, the other thing we could do is, what if we took it and we made a paradiddle out of it, just for fun, so that we're playing all of the 16th notes. This will be paradiddle rock in 15-16 time. So this is very simply literally playing 3 paradiddles. So I'm just playing 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 1, 2, 3, 1 E and a 2. And the paradiddle is kind of nice with this because if you're playing a tempo where you needed that smoothness, that movement in it, it's almost, I always say this, be the shaker in your groove. Be the shaker. Make the groove feel like chicka, 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 chicka. Become the shaker. I'm not telling you to just go eat a garbage pail filled with beads and then jump up and down or something. Don't actually be the shaker, but you know what I'm saying. All right, so paradiddle rock 15-16 time. We have that 1 E. So that, by the way, the little, you can use that 1, 2, 3 as very small transition fills. So so if you start to think of it like this, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 1. Right? So I'm using that little 3-note thing as some shorter fills, or from the third beat of the bar. 1, 2 and a 3 and a 1, 2, 3 and a 1, 2, 3 and a 1. Right? Just a way to kind of start thinking about this stuff, where you can round it over, make those edges not so hard, make everything groove. That's the name of the game here, right? All right. So what if we we'll keep moving with this. So what if we took that, so we're thinking of the next one, we're going to start thinking of what if we add to the measure. So we're going to go into 1916 time. There's really famous 1916 groove that everyone's heard from Keep It Greasy. I have a really nice transcription of that. And maybe in a part 2 we'll get into maybe some Zappa grooves and some things that utilize this stuff. I'm going to give you the 101 on 1916. So now we're adding to the bar. So if 4/4 is 16/16, how many do we have left over, kiddies? Exactly. So there's 3 extra notes. So if we're playing a bar of 4/4 plus 3/16 instead of a bar of 3/4 plus 16, which was 15/16, now we're a bar of 4/4 plus 3 notes, 3/16 notes. So we could play 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Right, so now I'm playing sort of a little looser, funkier pattern, and then adding those 3/16ths to the end. And again, you know, if the melody went that way, it's kind of a cool thing, right? So we have, instead of 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 5 E and a, we're one shy of 5/4 time. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 2 3 1 E and a 2 3 4 1 2 3 1. Okay? So 15/16 we did. Now we did 19/16. And so the paradiddle thing in 19/16 would be this. Kind of nice, right? We have those extra 3 beats. You could definitely get super creative with that. Could also get kind of cross rhythmic ahead of it. Let's think like anybody know what I played? Tell us in the chat. I stole that from Vinny. It's in the end of Greasy. But so that that little cross rhythmic thing with the 3, we're still just in 4/4 plus 3 beats, right? Now let's move forward a little bit more. What if we were to add? Oh, I actually put a transcription of that in there. Don't cheat. See if you can figure it out just from hearing it. All right. So. So then, I have a couple different versions of the 19/16. Let me see. So we have I haven't gone through this one in a while, but oh. Okay, so what I wrote in there was basically 2 groups of 6, 2 groups of 6, and then a group of 7, right? So there's another one. I'll have to go through that again. I'm not even sure what I wrote there, but there's some other variations of this on the sheet, and maybe in the next part I'll go through some of those. I want to get to the 21/16, which again. We're taking 4/4 time and we're adding notes to the end, okay? So this is basically this idea. We're playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 16th notes, right? But I'm going to subdivide that into 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Again, this is where we're subdividing so that we're not counting these longer groups. We're cutting everything into smaller groups. So 21/16 would be 16/16 or 4/4 plus 5 16th notes. 1 2 1 2 3 is going to be my subdivision. So I'm just going to play a straight 1 2 3 4 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 1 2 1 2 3 1 1 2 1 2 3 1. Okay. So what if we did our paradiddle groove? 1 and a 3 and a 3 and a 1 and a 1 and 1 and a 3 and a 3. Kind of interesting, right? And then I also, this goes back to the other thing we did before, but check this out. Anybody know what I'm playing there? So that one is, again, 21/16. I was playing 3 groups of 5 and a group of 6. So, again, subdividing, cutting this stuff into smaller, digestible chunks is really important. And I put in a counting scale at the end of this doc when you download the PDF. And this intro is basically just a kind of a gateway to playing some odd time signatures. Real quickly, what if you were playing sort of a funk groove in 3/4? That could be considered an odd time. What if we did a paradiddle 3/4 kind of groove? 1, 2 E and a 3 and I almost played in the 15/16 again. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 1 E. Right, so you could play something in 3/4 that's not so characteristic of 3/4 as we know it, always being sort of a waltz, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But if we take that and come up with some linear concepts or some funkier concepts, so 3/4 can be different, right? And then, as I mentioned earlier, that jazz waltz in 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, right? From the basic kind of pattern in take 5. So that's where a lot of this influence came from really early on. So I just wanted to mention, there's a lot of information, but there's a document that I put underneath the transcription of the grooves that I was playing, and kind of talks about the origin of this stuff and the folkloric origin. So Turkey, Greece, Bulgarian rhythms, and there's names for them, and there's YouTube links in the document that kind of point you at folkloric music that this comes from. And this music has been around for centuries, and it's sort of, this stuff is commonplace in those countries. In every town, they have a different dance that goes to these different rhythms. And so they may be dancing in 7/8, they might be dancing in 9/8, and not simple melodies. The American music is kind of deep ingrained in, blues and jazz and rock and a lot of 4/4. And in these other countries, they're dancing to these subdivisions of, like a simple, I'll play a simple subdivision of some of this, but like one and one and one and that kind of stuff. They're dancing to this stuff. So, and if you watch the dances, you're like, how on earth are they doing that? They're teaching it to these, as children, they're learning it. And I would say that the culture is pretty well preserved in these countries, where I think if you go visit, you can see these dances done, and hear these melodies and this music. And there are transcriptions in that second document, that Word document. There's it's a PDF of my Word document, but there's transcriptions of some of the melodies that I say to you, go listen to those melodies, check it out. There's a website which is called like Folk Finder, and I put the website in that document too. You can look up these different melodies and rhythms and time signatures and hear what the traditional music sounds like. There's little sound bites that you can play. And I think it's worth doing it so that you know kind of where this stuff came from. It didn't just show up on a Rush album, even though we'd like to think that, but it comes from very early folkloric music and Balkan music, and it's pretty interesting. So, and I will just say that Blue Rondo a la Turk, which is the first track that I heard from Dave Brubeck on that album, which is from 1959, I think, or 57. I'm forgetting. It's in the document, but he's playing 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2, and that perked up my ears as a kid, and I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. Like, my sister was listening to disco. Like, nothing against disco. I listen to bass lines that come out of the disco tunes, right? But, it's like all of a sudden I was hearing all this stuff, and they're playing da 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 da. And, that was in the 50s. And so Dave Brubeck was very influenced by, he was on the road, traveled internationally, went to Turkey and Greece and these places, and he heard, I think, Turkish wedding music, and there was this rhythm that's in 9 that he was inspired by and put it on his record. So that's kind of where my influence came from with the Odd Times, before I ever got to Mahavishnu, Rush, and UK, which I love all of that. So basically, in this last couple of minutes, I'd just like to open it up. Is anybody we should say hello to, first of all, or anybody that has a question for any of the content? I can see the chat. I see there's some people in it. Oh, Chris Schneider is in there tonight. Hey, dude, you made it. Thanks for, what did he write? That was so confusing. What was so confusing? Okay, so I don't know if you were telling me that some of the content was confusing, or I'm just confusing in general. Paul Briscoe, dude, what's up, brother? How you doing, man? Thanks for being in there tonight. I see Russ Palladino, dude. Yeah, man. Russ is the opening track was going to be a different tune tonight, but I don't have a good mix of it, so I have to get that together. But Russ and I are working on a project with a buddy of ours, Rob Glick, who I grew up with playing in rock and roll bands, and mostly original stuff. And then I had Rob in my fusion group for a long time with Jeff Radke, who is writing a lot of the material and co-writing. And so Rob Glick put together this fusion thing that we're doing now that we're recording with, and it's I would say it's like a funk fusion project. It's awesome. We have Bill Ware on vibes, Russ Palladino on saxes, Rob Glick on bass. We have a guy named Capers on guitar that I've never met, but he's on some of the tracks. There's some great music coming down the pipeline soon, and I'm definitely going to open with some of those tracks in coming weeks. I just have to get better mixes because the bass was kind of buried in the mix that I wanted tonight, so I chose to go to the book and kind of played the track from my book called Lucky 7. So check that out. Who else is in that chat there? I see. I can't. Where's my glasses, man? I need my goggles. I told you this last time. I need my goggles or I can't see. Stephen Rock 23. He said yes. The fish. Oh yeah, man. The fish is very cool. Yup. Yes. Steve McGuire. What's up, dude? You should come to the workshop Thursday night if you're available. By the way, Nico, the filmmaker. What's up, buddy? I'm doing a workshop on Thursday night, so any local drummers, come down to the workshop. We're going to be working all kinds of rudimental combinations, some really fun stuff. I have new stuff in the booklet. It's edition 25 of the booklet, the 2020 version. Hit that cancel button. Yeah, it's like on the... There you go. Nice. No. So, come down to the workshop. We're going to be doing some really cool combinations of rudimental stuff, working on the hands together. I set up 15 practice pads. We'll see how many people show up this week. It's the first one I've done in a while, so hopefully there's a good turnout. Thursday night, 8 p.m., 7:30 p.m., I'm sorry, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 121 Cleveland Avenue in Staten Island. Who else is in there? Did I say hello to everybody? Oh, what did Briscoe say?
I can't see it.
Split it up. Oh, split it up. 7-8. Nice. Yeah. So like the subdivisions and everything. If you have any questions about that stuff, put it in the chat, or you can. I have a filling in the grooves. Gmail account that I'll announce in the description once I edit this tonight's live stream and take out all my bad notes. So I'll put that in there. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to me, about this stuff. But do download the sheet. It breaks down all these, complex time signatures and longer time signatures really easily. And yeah, so that's the 101 on the odd times, which we'll definitely do a part 2. And I think I'm going to cite some specific grooves from tunes and some specific stuff that I can pull up transcription of. I have a lot of that stuff in my book. In the tribute section, there's a lot of fills that are in different time signatures, but we'll go to the grooves from those tunes. So that's pretty much it for tonight. That's the 101 on the odd times. Download the PDF, work on it, check it out. I hope you enjoyed tonight's live stream. Tune in next week at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I will announce the topic later this week at some point. I have to decide what that's going to be. I also want to just thank Sabian Cymbals for these beautiful instruments that I play. Sabian has some very cool things coming out soon. Even graphic cymbals, which I've never seen in my entire life. They're doing it. Sabian is always on the cutting edge, always coming up with something new. So there'll be graphic cymbals. I was just checking it out. So that could be something really interesting. And also the pedals. So Offset Pedals. Love these guys. So Dave Cubes owns Offset Pedals, and they make a unique product. Definitely different. You'll notice that my snare is dead center on my kit. And I even have some students that are out buying these lovely offset pedals now because they see them in the studio. I actually have 4 sets in my studio and 1 set packed up for work. So I wouldn't have 5 sets of these if I didn't like them very much. So, kudos to them. And I will see you guys on the next one. I'm actually signing off now. So, Billy, just say hello real quick. Billy is my right-hand man over here doing cameras, doing sound. He's the man behind the curtain. As I said last week, he's my Willy Wonka. No, he's my wizard. He's the wizard, like the Wizard of Oz, hidden behind the curtain. So, yes. All right, I'll see you all next week. And thanks for tuning in. Definitely get people to check it out if you like what you see. And subscribe and hit that notification bell. Okay.
Later, guys.
See you next week. Take care.